Hello everyone, quickly before this video starts, we just have a fun little special announcement. We are launching a Patreon that'll be 3 separate tiers of bronze, silver, and gold. Don't worry, this won't change any of our current YouTube content. This is all just additional stuff. We are not taking any stuff away and putting it behind a paywall. This is all just additional stuff for anyone who may want to support or be interested in what we are about to offer. And what we are offering is over there, you'll be able to access some additional exclusive content, such as reviews for films we were too late to review, such as The Substance or Megalopolis, both of which are already up there. We will be doing some short, quick videos on award season news, for example, like when Blitz reviews drop later this week, we will do a video over there addressing that quickly. We will have monthly live streams exclusive to members. Each individual member will get a rotating shout out in our videos. We will be doing some retrospectives on past seasons, as well as some retrospective series, such as watching every Best Actress winner, which is a series we have already begun. And you can vote in polls for what we choose to cover over there. And finally, if you leave a comment, you can get your own individual short video addressing said comment. If you're interested in those perks, I've got a link in the description and in the pinned comment as well down below. If Patreon isn't something you are interested in trying out, you have no experience with it, we are also going to be offering this same stuff in a YouTube membership connected to YouTube, just right there on the join button down below. If that is easier for you, that is an option as well. So yeah, thank you all. Do it if you want, you don't have to. But yeah, check it out. And now on to the video. Hello everyone, and welcome to our review of Joker FOLIE, a much anticipated film for many people, including this channel. Since we won't be talking Oscars for much of the review, I'll take this chance to give myself a little pat on the back and say, I never believed in this film as an Oscar contender, and I don't think it will be. I think the best way to talk about this film is starting off with our thoughts on the first film, because I think the second film is in direct conversation with this film, or with the first film. So, Anthony, what were your thoughts on the first film and on now this sequel?
Yes, I think that direct response is a large reason why the second movie doesn't work, because there just seems to be a disconnect about what that first film represented. Now, granted, it was a very controversial film, and it seemed that everybody had a different take. But I think ultimately, what I came away from the film appreciating and quite admiring to this day, it's still one of my favorite films of that year, was that it was a cautionary tale. And it took the point of view of a character that you had always maligned and asked, how does somebody come into the comic book villain archetype? Why do we see binaries so clearly? And it tried to break those things down. And I thought it was successful. I thought it was a modern take on the classic Scorsese anti-hero. Yes, there were people who had issues with the movie. And frankly, I think the biggest issue with Joker Folie à Deux is that Todd Phillips listened too much to those critiques. I have to imagine that's the issue, and not that he had such a wildly different interpretation of his own character that wasn't conveyed in that first film, or at least wasn't made clear to the first film. Because I just feel the major issue with this movie is not having consistency as far as what the Joker represents.
Yeah. This is an interesting film for me because I, unlike you, wasn't a huge fan of the first film. I thought it was more just, I don't want to say ripoff, but it was very similar to other films, like people say, like Taxi Driver, King of Comedy, and it didn't feel like it progressed anything beyond what those films were saying. It really didn't feel like it had anything new to add. And it didn't really feel like Todd Phillips even knew what he was saying or had like a theme to it. And I think that continues in this. Honestly, I think the reason this interests me more is just because it's a little more meta. Whereas in the first, it's like he's responding to like the response to his film, which I just find inherently more interesting and refreshing than him kind of doing similar stuff to what other films have done with a Joker paint on it. And he kind of puts the first film on trial. And I just find I find that much more interesting to me personally, even though I don't think it works. I just think he's trying to say more and he's taking more creative swings in this than he did in the first one. That even though I don't think it comes together, and I think it's kind of incoherent and inconsistent and messy. I think that there's simply in the motivation and the effort here. I think that there was more for me personally to admire than I found in the first one. Even in the performances, like I find Joaquin Phoenix's performance in this more layered and nuanced than I thought it was in the first one. I think he's doing better work in this. The cinematography, I think, is stronger than the first one, but even then, I don't think that's enough to save this film. I agree with you. I do think he still doesn't know what he's saying. It seems like he's all over the place in his thoughts.
We're gonna go into spoilers, so warnings if you're one of the people. A lot of people didn't see
One
this.
of the many. Yeah.
So, I think by the time you get to the end of the film, which it just felt like comic book masochism, the amount of darkness, and I just felt so depressed. When you get to the last scene, which has a Heath Ledger stand-in, it's not canonically the same character, but he does the same, cutting of his mouth. We have that character putting a knife in his mouth, making the smile after he stabbed Arthur, and Arthur bleeds out to death. I really want to know what the intention was. What was his point with this movie? Because it seems so nihilistic to the point that it doesn't mesh with human nature. The story just feels like you are involuntary to the darkness of the world. It shames you for grieving, because I thought the strongest note of that first film was talking about how and why people retreat into fantasy worlds, and how Arthur's abuse is what created the Joker. Now we're apparently shaming him for ever being the Joker. There's no hope in this world. There's no fantasy in this world. When we return to the stairs, they're completely devoid of light, and all the spirit that came out of Arthur when he was dancing on them last time we were there. There just seems to be nothing worth living for by the end of this movie, and I think the major issue with the ending that nihilistic is that who are we in the metaphor? Who are we supposed to be seeing this through? I don't think we're supposed to be seeing it through Arthur, because I found the last film was a cautionary tale, and you're not supposed to be like Arthur. So I just think that for a nihilistic ending to work, we have to see what should we do that character didn't, that allowed that character to go into darkness. And I don't think any of the characters in this movie represent any shred of actual human interest that made it worth seeing a lot of the brilliance that's in this movie. There's undeniably a lot of genius moments. There's a lot of great ideas. I think the first half of the movie works mostly. I liked a lot of the scenes establishing Arkham and the prison. It talks about the prison structure and how it condemns the atmosphere that it's not interested in rehabilitating people. It's interested in punishing people. I thought that all was very strong. Yeah, it's a lot of things where I really was on board with a lot of what it was doing, and I saw the vision, but it amounts to something so cold and so inhumane that I just don't think you can defend any part of it. With Lady Gaga, and we can bring in her, making her this groupie, basically, that fell in love with the lead singer of the band. She gets one character trait, and that's it. And it's an insult to Lady Gaga,
she's wasted. Yeah,
way more capable than this role ever asked of her. Maybe the deleted scenes ask more of her.
Hopefully.
They don't even give her a lot of great things to sing. And a lot of the time she's singing in the world of Joker, not in the fantasy. And I'm like, or so I should say the world of Gotham. I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, why is she not belting? She gets one song to belt in the fantasy, but all the other times she's like half singing Tom Hooper style.
She has to almost sound like a bad singer. That's what they ask Lady Gaga to do. It's crazy.
In the environment of the world. And I think that brings the issue, the musical sequences, where when I saw the trailer, I saw the vision. I was like, this is how we're going into his fantasy world. He came into this world dancing in the bathroom and on the Murray Franklin show. Like, I bought it. Totally thought it worked. I would say more of the sequences in this movie take place in the production design and the environment of Gotham than in the fantasy world in Arthur's head. And that's just a major issue, because the first movie didn't establish that that's what you can expect from this environment. So the diegesis here, as far as, are they actually singing? Is this in his head? There are times when he's in the Arkham, and he'll start a song and then they'll realize it was in his head. But other times it seems as if they are singing in the world of Gotham, like when she's talking to him at the booth, the visitor's booth, and I'm like,
or the interview.
Just every single song had a different set of rules, and there were so many of them. Like, learn how to do a couple of the A songs right, then rushing through so many B songs.
And they don't move the plot forward.
They don't move the plot along. Just what was the function of the musicals other than it looks cool? And I think that's the issue, is that Phillips feels like if he makes something dark he makes something serious, if he makes something, out there, like making it a musical, then that makes it interesting. And I think that what makes stuff interesting is the ideas, not the packaging that the ideas are surrounded in.
Like, there are moments in the film. I think the main thing that carries this beyond the cinematography, which it does look nice, is, like you said, the actors. Like, there are moments where it's just incredible actors acting opposite each other. And even if the dialogue's not incredible and the ideas aren't really there, like watching Joaquin Phoenix and Brendan Gleeson or Catherine Keener or Lady Gaga just
Two standouts.
acts
I think
back and forth.
they were
Yeah,
fantastic.
it still makes it semi-watchable, because I do think overall it's kind of a boring film in my opinion. There were points, especially once the court scene started, where it's like, okay, where is this going? Like, what is the point of this? And it felt kind of empty and void of really any meaning or like through line through it all. I think also acting wise, the Gary Puddle scene was probably the best scene in the film, in my opinion. I think that actor did a great job, and I felt like that would have made for a better like change in the character, because that soon after that scene, Arthur does switch and he like says the Joker's like, he talks during the court scene. He's like, I'm not the Joker, I'm just Arthur and all that. And I feel like it seemed like in the film narratively, what motivated that was the sexual assault scene, whereas I think the Gary Puddle scene I think would have made for a much better motivation for that. And I felt like the assault scene was just kind of unnecessary and
Was it a
just
sexual assault?
if with the prison guards, yeah.
Oh God, I
Yeah.
not even
It's
more
shot
dark.
Yeah,
Jesus.
it's shot interestingly, so it's not like completely like obvious, but I'm pretty sure.
The Gary Puddle scene, I think, is one of the stronger points, but frankly, because it's Arthur being Joker. And it felt like,
Yeah,
well, what's the point of the last movie if he doesn't get to be Joker in this movie? And so the fact that there's less Joker in this movie, it just, again, there's a disconnect between the intentions of where the last story was supposed to end and what this story wanted to tackle. Yeah, when you have, and I think the major issues too is like when you have so many clear things of what it could be. It could be a musical. It could be the comic book. It could be a courtroom drama, and it's none of those things. I mean, I
it
I
doesn't
could
do any of them well.
not do any of them. I could never tell you that this is supposed to be Harley Quinn and her romance with Joker because I mean, Suicide Squad 2016 had a better handle on this character than this movie does. Um, yeah, I just it's a very exhausting movie in the worst ways because you see something. There is a vision to this movie, and I really wanted to believe in it, but I just don't think I can. There's not enough human interest in this movie to make you feel that this is any way applicable to anything beyond the theater that's playing it.
No, no, I agree. I think at the end of the day, he had too much to say, but also too little. He had so much that he wanted to say that he ended up saying nothing, I feel like,
That's
at the
true.
end of
Yeah,
the day.
yeah.
And that the conversations about the film end up being more interesting than what the film itself inspired. Like, the conversations that are inspired by the film are more interesting and nuanced, honestly, than anything that's within the film itself.
Mhm.
So I don't think that works out for it. I do think it's interesting, like, because the comic stuff doesn't really bother me that much. I do think it's interesting how Arthur, both in the comic world in the movie and also in the real world, like, is disappointing because he doesn't embrace the Joker. Like, everyone's disappointed in the film because he doesn't embrace the Joker, and it feels like some people might be disappointed in this film because it doesn't completely embrace him being the Joker and this actually being a Joker story. So I do think that's interesting, but once again, I don't think he's really saying anything there. I think that's kind of just happenstance more so than like a message.
But
So
I think the main issue too, then, and this is what the film highlights, and for some people this was the issue with the first film, is that this never felt like the Joker. Like
mhm.
you put every other iteration of the Joker, this just he doesn't feel like he lines up with that. And so if your main thesis is isn't it dangerous to believe in the Joker? It's like, well, but then he has to be the Joker at some point in this movie. He was in the
True.
last one, he was telling jokes. I mean, there were certain panels that came out of Dark Knight Returns. And so when I look at this movie, it just like I can't there is no reality where I can imagine this Joker going up against any version of Batman. And given that that's where this character starts, this just took him too far afield for him to be interesting in any dramatic capacity.
I respect the bold swing. I'll say that about it. I respect that even if for the most part it doesn't work, and I think it's kind of boring, and inconsistent and a little incoherent. I do respect how I think it's a pretty bold swing to make this film, and I would take this over a film like Deadpool and Wolverine, where it's just like the kind of film that those fan focused study groups they're making are going to make, where it's just complete fan service and all that stuff. I think I'll take interesting bold swings in like Trojan horsed within the comic book genre rather than stuff like that any day, even if it doesn't work.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do think I like this movie more than Deadpool and Wolverine, and I know I've been a little bit more negative on it, but it's mixed for me. Like there's moments that I just absolutely love, and I think moments that I think it is bold, and I applaud it for what it was able to do. I think a lot of the scenes in Arkham really worked for me, and I think a lot of the other things I can see the ideas for it. I just can't get behind a movie that's message is there's no point to anything, and no
Hmm.
matter what you do, you will succumb to darkness. I can't. It's an ending so nihilistic that I really can't see the forest for the trees because it seems like this movie just wants to burn the whole forest down.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So, and then I think we already touched on it. Oscars are goose
Very
egg, I feel like, for this film, and not really going to happen because it has a stink around it where I don't think anyone's going to want to touch it.
yeah.
Um, so, yeah, any final thoughts on Joker Folie à Deux?
Um, I think we said all our thoughts. If you would like
I
to
think
see more thoughts on certain movies like this, do you want to tell them where they can find it?
you can find some more thoughts on films like this, other reviews for films that we might be a little late to reviewing, like The Substance, Megalopolis, other big films like that, as well as some retrospective stuff, some fun stuff like that. There'll be more details on itself, but on a Patreon dedicated to this channel, where you can find even more exclusive coverage. We'll maybe do some exclusive live streams with just Patreon members if people actually sign up. So you can find all that stuff in a link down below in the Patreon. I'm sure I'll be posting it on social media and all that stuff too once it's all up and running. So that is where you can find more stuff like this. But for the meantime, you can like, you can subscribe, you can do all that fun stuff. Comment your thoughts on this film because it definitely, like we said, inspires a debate, a conversation down below. And yeah, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye, everyone.